Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Tim Zavislak, part of RTM Nexus's Leadership Council, a group of retail and digital leaders focused on sharing what's actually working across our industry right now. I'm the former chief digital officer at Conair, and today I run Golden Point Growth, where I advise PE-backed brands and public companies on the exact challenges we're diving into today. The challenge is that AI has fundamentally changed how customers discover and evaluate brands often before they even land on your website. And when they do arrive, the expectation is higher than ever. But what we're seeing across enterprise organizations is that the problem isn't a lack of data or insight. Quite honestly, it's the opposite of that, is that there's a lot of data out there, but it's the ability to actually do something with it and mechanize it in the business quickly and effectively. That's what we're going to unpack today. Where AI is exposing gaps across the buying journey and why so many teams are still struggling to translate insight into execution. Before we dive in, I would like to have our panelists introduce themselves. Ladies first, Bree, please tell us a little about yourself.
Hey guys, my name is Bree Fowler. I'm at Dell Technologies. I currently run our strategic revenue programs, which is a nice way of saying transformation programs that are driving profit opportunities back into the business. In the past, a little over a decade that I've been at Dell, I've run the end-to-end experience strategy, and so now my team dives into ways that we can optimize the buying experience really end to end across the globe.
Fantastic, fantastic.
My name's
Girish,
Girish Joshi. I'm at LG Electronics. I run the home appliances e-commerce system. So if you go to www.lg.com, everything associated with that is with me.
fantastic.
Great.
John, our sponsor today from Fastr.
Yeah. Hey guys. So I'm the CEO here at Fastr. We've built a cross-functional AI platform for commerce optimization. So think analytics, personalization, A/B testing, and deployment right to site in a unified environment with no developer handoffs. So we sit kind of directly at the intersection of what you just talked about, Tim. So the gap between insight and execution, we see it every day inside of enterprises that we support. So we've got a pretty strong point of view on the problem and what it's actually going to take to close it. So great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Um, Look, we sort of in warming up, our team for the session today, we sort of, stumbled on something that AI is awesome at finding every skeleton, as it were, in the digital closet. And those skeletons, whatever you find in these closets, it's usually not good. So stuff that flies out of there is usually like never a good surprise. And, what really was happening is it's surfacing so many things that have been sort of like under the radar that nobody really sort of noticed. Disconnects between images and copy, conflicts, across specs from one page to the other, and brand language that contradicts what some retailers are saying about your own brand. And it's servicing the stuff that's existed for years. And, in some cases that's a gift. In some cases it's a crisis for a lot of brands. And I think what I wanted to open up, and Brad, I'd ask you to lead this off for us. What is the most uncomfortable thing AI has exposed about your site? And then what did you actually do about it? Don't tell me anything you don't want to, admit to, but just topically, what are some of the, the big things that you guys have really acted on with the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've touched on this topic in our prep call a little bit, but AI is really an accelerant, right? And we see that in the industry. Um, AI will shine a very bright light on gaps that exist in an ecosystem. It doesn't necessarily surface anything that's new. It's just really putting a focus on what's there and what's broken. What I've seen is that at the core of those issues is data and content. There are very few times where a glaring issue has come up that doesn't have its roots in data quality, unification of data, quality of content, governance of content, um, conflicting sources of content. We've seen even from some of our partner third-party brands that we saw on Dell.com, as we're getting product data feeds in, one pair of headphones in two different colors could have two wildly different product detail page copy banks to pull from. Those are the kind of things that you start to see, and that's one sliver of it. But that's really the theme that I'm finding, is that inconsistencies in data, data that may come from different sources with slightly different metrics pulled around them, and just conflicting systems, and then your overall content quality, right? We want to be able to compete in other AI tools and sources external to our sites. How are we showing up in those is not necessarily a direct reflection of what's on our site, but a compilation of the content that exists from multiple sources. And so those are some of the themes that we see. And so there has to be a lot of focus on fixing that and addressing it at the core.
LLMs are picking you guys up, right? You've got two of the same thing. LLMs are picking up two different things. End consumer, she's looking at this going, I don't know what this is, and she's moving on.
Right,
Yes?
right, exactly. Because at that point, you're seeing conflicting stories, conflicting recommendations. I mean, even if let's say you're shopping for a laptop and Tom's Guide says this is the best and PC Magazine says this is the best, already you're going, I don't know, right? And so these conflicting sources of data, and the way that LLMs are actually pulling from multiple sources, not just reputable publishers, not just brand sites, but Reddit, Wikipedia, other sources that are user generated content. Lots of scenarios make it really hard to trust the content that's out there. And so there's got to be a lot of work from a brand's perspective to go and make sure that what's out there is accurate and reflecting accurately to the product that they're selling, and accurate to what the market is saying, right? There's got to be some consistency there.
And, look, and for the civilian, like, that doesn't do what we do for a living all day, they neither know nor care. I think is where you're going with this. They just want to know, hey, I want to find the best laptop. I want to find the best headphones. And like, oh my God, like I'm overloaded already. And this should be simple, but like it's difficult sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Got it. Thank you. Garish, I'm curious, you're in a similar set of categories as Bree is. I'm curious what your experiences are in that.
So I think the first problem that we have is just the breadth of assortment. Once you start getting over a few hundred, a couple thousand PDP pages, it's not possible to look at everything manually if there's a person involved. And there's certain things that a person has to be involved for. So the mismatch between copy and imagery is something that until AI, like the only person who could approach that was a human. So quality control around that particular synchrony is really helpful. But there are a lot of other things. If there's JavaScript involved on the page, often the best arbiter of like what actually happened is what a user experience is. So AI is this kind of user experience automator, really helped us a lot, particularly when it came to things like our checkout page, where we found that there were certain kinds of errors that they weren't errors that were getting picked up by our customer funnel, so to speak. But oh gosh, we had no idea a customer was seeing this, and that
which should be a flawless experience. That checkout, that should be like sacrosanct, right? That's really where you're going, I think.
That's where I'm going with it, and before AI, we couldn't find these problems because there weren't enough human hours to iterate through it.
And if there were, with somebody, 4 a.m. out of one bloodshot eye doing QA, and like that's only going to get you so far.
Right, and so then there becomes this question of objectivity, and so these are the pluses of how AI has been working for us. So it's a lot of it has to do with it just being able to process a lot of information very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think your lights might be AI, by the way. I'm not sure. John, you have incredibly broad purview into lots of different buildings, lots of different brands. You guys do this all day long. I'm just curious, are there, without calling out certain brands, like, is there anybody killing it at this yet? Or is everybody kind of still in the crawl, walk, run stage?
Yeah. Well, and I agree with a lot of what was just said by Garish and Bree. I think what I'll add is this, and I think the uncomfortable thing right now for brands and retailers is AI is exposing not just like the skeleton in the closet, but the process that got us here in the first place. So yeah, we work with many brands and retailers all day long, optimizing their digital, and AI is definitely surfacing. Things that things that humans have always surfaced just at a larger scale. So think about like conversion rates that can be improved. Think about products that are being surfaced on that PDP that don't match the campaign or the ad strategy, or things like Garish was referring to just around errors. It's definitely surfacing that, but it's also surfacing that these gaps have existed, on the site, sometimes for years. And this really kind of points to there's no continuous process or ability to really take action and optimize in a continuous iterative process. And so I think what we see is that that's the real problem right now, is especially for brands and retailers with large product catalogs, complex purchase journeys, thousands of PDPs. They've built the intelligence tools, sometimes dozens of them sitting across different silos and different teams. But they haven't yet built the kind of connected execution systems, allow them to really kind of change things. And it just kind of keeps piling up, and their people and their teams just can't act fast enough. So that's the real kind of uncomfortable truth here, is that all of these dashboards and metrics and SaaS apps, that are, they're just sitting on the shelf, and your execution, that's really kind of the barrier right now. So I'll share just a quick proof point. And McKinsey recently surveyed hundreds of merchants and found 71% of their AI merch tools had limited to no effect on their business. So let that kind of sit in. 71%. These are not small brands; these are large enterprise retailers. And the problem was in AI. The problem was really that execution rigor underneath.
So staying on that, like honestly, it's uncomfortable. Like that is quite honestly, it's uncomfortable because these platforms are not cheap. Like none of these things are inexpensive, and it's a little uncomfortable. I mean, to see a number like that, and I'm sure it's directionally accurate. Um, every platform, if we could stay on that, John, surfaces data. I mean, if you want to have data 6 ways from Sunday about the littlest nit in your business, you can have. But very few to none of these platforms that I've seen are able to close that execution loop without a dev or a team of devs in the middle still today, even with Claude Code and all this other awesome stuff. But that gap, to me, it seems to be where lots of brands are stuck right now. They've got awesome intelligence, but like no real sort of like direction to go execute that and momentum to go push that through the business.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think but we are seeing success stories, right? So there are brands and retailers out there that are leading the way and really, starting to see some great results. That's exactly kind of where we operate, and I think, the situation that is probably playing out in most of the brands and retailers out there is what you just said. Someone's looking, at different analytics silos, probably across dozens of different tools and apps, and they spot something after the fact, of course. And let's say its conversion rates in the PDP are down for a segment of customers, and the teams know what they want to do. So the people and the teams inside of these organizations, they know what they need to test. But what happens is they just get stuck in the way it used to be before AI, where they log a ticket and it sits in a dev backlog for weeks, and they can't get what they need deployed because it's the sprint is full, or there's a separate team responsible for that. So what happens is, today pre AI is something, to get something live, it's four to six handoffs, or 2 to 3 different systems, and different dev queues. And that's not a failure of technology. That's not a failure of ambition or strategy. It's just the structural execution problem that exists now that AI is here and can change things. And what it can help you do is it helps you kind of collapse that loop. But you have to rethink your process. You have to rethink how you get work done and eliminate those handoffs and design your process kind of end to end and more cross functionally. That's where we're seeing real progress being made.
Process. I'm not a fan of process for process sake, because at the end of the day, I gotta get stuff done. We got to sell more t-shirts, as my dear friend Dominic likes to say. I had to sell more t-shirts today. So process is what it is, but not process for process sake. But in the case of what you're talking about, it's critical because there's just so much flying around the platforms that there's different silos and all that. If you don't have like this thing thought through end to end from like, ideation all the way through execution and then adjustments and pivots after the fact, you're dead. It's just not going to move.
Yeah, agreed. And I think AI brings the most value when it has the most context. I think we've all seen that up close, no matter what we're working on. So the more context you can give it across your organization and your workflows. And to your earlier point there, the customer, they don't care about how you're organized.
Yes.
They just care about that journey and that experience. So
they want the t-shirt. They don't care. Your org chart, what they do not care. They want what they want.
That's right.
They're king and queen. At the end of the day, it's what they are. Bree, I'm curious. Bureaucracy and getting things done and trust in an organization. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think where we have the biggest opportunity is speed of trust. A lot of teams I'm finding, you've got now, AI centers of competency that are driving strategic initiatives, but they're doing it from altitude. And the working teams are trying to come together. We are just finding so many layers of bureaucracy, a tendency to over process. There's the very typical, we're going to have a meeting to prep for the meeting, right? And yeah, and it's life pre AI too. So that's not new. But when you're working with something that's moving so quickly inherently that the pace of change is accelerated from any other big innovation or big bursts that I've certainly seen in the last decade, the speed of trust and the speed of movement becomes really critical. And so if we're not able to align, commit, and move and be really comfortable with the fact that, hey, none of us are experts because this plane is being built while we're flying it, right? We're learning as we go on the fly. And we've got to be able to commit and deliver and move. And so I'm personally finding, areas where I wish I could wave my magic wand and get us moving forward is quicker alignment and a quicker path to action. And a lot of that is amongst, peers and leaders, really.
Yeah. I'm sure the Great Dell organization is not guilty of this. I'm sure they're not.
Of course
but
not.
I've seen one or two buildings, I'll say that you've got an AI initiative from the top, and there's not necessarily lots of additional sort of like instruction, I'll say, more than go AI everything and go. It's like to me, it's like telling your kid, go study harder. Well, let me show you how to study. Let me show you how to learn. And I think that, what and I am hopeful of this, by the way, is that across, leadership teams across, enterprise today, you're going to see in the coming weeks and months, these leadership teams, hopefully, and I am really hopeful of this, that they're going to be able to say to their teams, hey, I want to AI something, but here's what I want it to look like on the other side, whether it's top line revenue, bottom line profitability, speed to market, whatever that may be. And I think, again, I think that's going to be hopefully an evolution of what we're all sort of experiencing here, because when you have that clearer mandate from the top, it tends to sort of break through some of the stuff we're talking about. And I think that's going to be sort of one of the next, things, that hopefully we'll start reading about soon.
Right. Well, and you hit on something important. Okay. There's this mandate of go AI everything and go do the AI and get the AI and we've got to automate and we want to be more autonomous but how are we going to measure and what does success look like? What are the KPIs that say we've done this well? We did AI. and we did it well, right? And so what does that look like? I think that's a really foundational step that I'm not hearing enough conversation, amongst peers in the industry, right? Of how are we measuring success and what does this look like? I've heard a little bit. There are bits and pieces coming, and I do think that some folks are starting to think about that, but I'm I'm almost astounded at the lack of conversation around, okay, how do we measure success here and what right looks like? Because there's a little bit of a shotgun splatter effect of, "Well, just go AI it, right? We need an
Yeah.
AI initiative, we need an AI strategy." Okay, well, let's say we put one together, we look back 18 months from now, how do we know we did it right? How do we know we did this well? And that's a piece I think where we're just bulldozing over in some
Yeah.
ways.
That not look, not for nothing. That bulldozing, by the way, is creating cottage industries. I'm seeing it every
Right,
day to
right.
go fix a lot of these really iffy AI implementations, like all over the place. So, look, I'm just an eternally optimistic guy. Yeah, job market is challenged and all that, and everyone knows that. Believe you me, there are just scores of opportunities running around out there that are just under the surface right now.
Mhm.
Boy, oh boy, are they going to be like off the charts in the coming 3, 4, 5 years. And so, like, I love talking to like kids. I've got a kid in college, got another one about to go. And it's like, guys, I don't know what you're hearing out there, but like, let me tell you, you guys get your head around this subject matter in
Oh,
general,
yeah.
you'll do well. You
Yeah,
really, really
I
will.
had a similar conversation with my boyfriend's 15-year-old last night, and, as she's getting ready to look at colleges and talking to her about, "Hey, you've gotta learn this skill set," right? You have to learn how to integrate AI, not wait for somebody to tell you what to do with it, but how to make this part of your daily process and behavior. I think, being so implanted within the industry, we've all found our own personal ways that AI is our trip planner, our reservation booker, our therapist, sometimes our financial planner, right? Like, help me come
Yeah.
across better in this email. Help me automate this. Give me the results. What should I? We're thinking about that natively. I don't know yet that generation is thinking that way, and that's one of the most important skill sets I think we can start to cultivate is start thinking about how you can work smarter, not harder, using these AI tools because there's so much value in it. And if you can figure out how to let that propel you, it's really, really going to give you a competitive advantage in life.
Yes. Yes. Yes to that. Garish, I'm curious your thoughts on all this.
I like the way that you put it in your first question about AI exposing skeletons in the closet. And we talked about the data skeletons, and now we're sort of talking about the organizational and process skeletons. And I think one of the big organizational, I don't know if it's even in the closet, but uh, IT teams are a part of our business. And every IT team that I know really wants to drive the biggest organizational impact that they can. And those are usually tied to some kind of headline KPI. Maybe it's financially oriented. Maybe it's like a big operational KPI, and they're just going to go after that, which is wonderful. But there's a ton of IT work that needs to be done to enable teams, and that's tends to be the less glamorous stuff. And it's a big part of what AI and the AI advantage ends up being. Uh, you guys also talked a little bit about um, this sort of, "Hey, AI will solve it," which is this kind of weird, way of handling management, um, not terribly, like, insightful, and yeah, that itself is a problem. I think that if you have organizations where someone doesn't clearly own a KPI or a process, and they themselves are looking to use AI to drive that outcome, you're gonna have problems. One of the solutions that I've had is really finding the right partner. So, this is one of the ways I use implementation partners. When I find things that are sort of not, uh, they're not the sexy thing for my IT team to do, this is exactly where a great partner kind of comes in handy.
You mentioned
What?
about some of this stuff being not sexy. I obviously I agree with you. My partner at Con Air, who was a CIO, John Harding, always referred to himself and his team as part of the business, not alongside, sort of in a sidecar. Because it's so true. If you don't have your IT organization sort of like in the boat with you and helping you steer the boat, you're nowhere. Because we on this call can come up with just the most awesome, robust ideas that whatever, but those are the guys, ladies and gentlemen, that have to go build it, and they have to have purview onto upstream, downstream, all the stuff, alongside of you. Otherwise, they're going to build you a lousy product, and that doesn't work either. You mentioned also, and I'm curious your thoughts, and if you guys are doing this, I talk to lots of brands all day long, and you know what? Some of this stuff that doesn't show up on a board deck, the kind of, not sexy stuff, I'm sort of inventing non-financial KPIs to say, hey, you know what? You want the big, flashy KPIs that are financial, obviously, and that's what we all want. I mean, none of this is a charity case here. We're all running, profitable businesses. There's a cadence of stuff that has to come first before you hit that. And I think, especially, with AI, I think it's really, really critical that we say, you know what, you're not just going to wave the wand over it and expect it to move bottom line, certainly not top line revenue. And that's a whole nother conversation. But like, there's all these things that have to happen out front before the other things happen. And I'm just curious if you guys are talking like that in your building.
I wouldn't quite say this. So, like I own a revenue metric. It's directly tied to me, and so there's some AI mini practices, pilots, or if you will, that are directly tied to revenue. There are a few of them, and so we can do it. But as you said, it also becomes really important to kind of find the right metrics for AI, and some of those aren't financial. We're as a matter of fact, the financial metrics are almost designed to obscure them. And this is things like, how well are our people really trained? Well, one of the things that AI does a great job of is compensating for a poorly trained person. And so this is this kind of thing we've tried to highlight a little bit. So yes and no. But I think I mean, the point that I would make around using AI in an organization is the people who are implementing and the people who are driving it, they need to be driving something that they are actually accountable for. Um, it, it's it, and right now, what I'm finding is very few leaders of any function really feel comfortable enough with AI to want to take on an AI project.
Yeah, it's interesting on that point. I mean, you're talking about org stuff and ownership and this and that. Bree, I'm curious, where as far as you are all concerned and what you're seeing and hearing out there in the marketplace. Um, your mileage may vary. I've seen lots of teams get quite a bit leaner. The answers that are sort of floating around out there are various and sundry, from tariffs to the price of eggs to AI to overhiring. I mean, pick a thing, the war, what have you. The bottom line that I've seen is that lots of headcount in many big buildings is getting cut. Um, AI was supposed to be picking up a lot of slack, but at the end of the day, and I know John is chomping at the bit to this, somebody has to go operationalize it. And, are you seeing that math actually work where, cut a few people, reduce some responsibilities, whatever, and then let AI do some things? Or is that still just vaporware?
Yeah, I'll say there's pockets of progress that I've seen. There's a lot of thought around what the future could and should look like. Um, on one hand, a leaner team theoretically and often in practice will allow you to be more nimble, right? And removing layers of decision making, removing some cooks in the kitchen does actually get you to a speed of action. And I've seen that be true. You still have to have the right people in the room. You still have to have the right talent on board. If you don't have talent that can leverage tools and process, you could have the Cadillac suite of tools and systems and software and do very little with it, right? And so I think
That
what
predates AI though. I mean,
right,
this is
well,
not
yeah,
new to world stuff.
that is life, period, right? So I think that what you're seeing now is okay, we've got this proliferation of tools that even predated AI, but now are touting, we use AI too, right? Some of that is a real efficiency, and I think AI has the power to bring a lot of cost efficiencies to a lot of businesses. As you scale and get people to move faster, there are a lot of functions that can really be accelerated, that then free up time for other things, right? And this is just the way that innovation goes. Is even pre AI, you could effectively automate yourself out of a role, right? You could set up reports and recurring. That's not even anything new. But I think what AI is giving us is the possibility to become wildly efficient in pockets if used well, right? If managed well. Let's say that there's a day that you have a team that exists that is maybe partially AI agents that work alongside you, right? Like that's some conversation that I've heard a lot in the industry.
Well, yeah.
In,
I mean,
in,
man down the street from me, his devs are running 7, 8, 9 agents. That's what they do
right,
now.
right,
Like this is
right.
normal.
And somebody's got to know and manage those processes and workflows. Somebody's got to build those agents. Like, right, this isn't a shortage of work to do. It's a shift of the work being done. And so, I'm optimistic. I think that there are a lot of possibilities. I haven't seen anything yet that makes me go, this is it. This is the game changing moment. I think we're on the cusp of it, but it just hasn't come into fruition yet. So you have a lot of tools that are trying to embed AI, trying to create these more efficient processes, and you're getting a flavor of what is to come. And some does it better than other, right? Like there are flavors and levels of um AI integration in tools and software. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for tools that are built well to scale and really change the way that businesses manage, process, and perform. And I'm
Management
optimistic.
still have to build them and still have to train them.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm optimistic, I'll say, but cautiously, right?
Yes.
We
Yeah,
haven't seen it yet,
I would
but it's
agree. I
coming.
would agree. Gurish is the eternal optimist. And I'd love to know your thoughts on this too.
So to answer your question directly, where jobs have been lost, has AI picked up the slack? I haven't seen that at all. There are jobs that were never hired for in the first place and were never done, and AI has absolutely picked up that slack. There's a really big opportunity there. And then there are jobs that are kind of being done, and AI, particularly with development, but it's not the only one. Particularly with development, but it's not the only one, where AI is making things go faster. And now in this world, one of the ironies is I've heard from 3 different developers this sense of burnout that everyone thinks that they are now much more productive than they ever were. And they are more productive, but not as much as everyone else seems to think. And this is frustrating for them. On the other hand, though, I find like at the very leanest teams, the ones that never had enough resources to begin with, AI just makes tremendous impact for them. So I think it varies. Certainly the headline promise of AI like taking jobs, yeah, I don't see that. But AI making folks more productive and doing what had never actually been done before, yes, I do see that.
Got it. John, you work with SMBs, enterprise, everything in between. What are you seeing out there in terms of the subject?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I guess the spin I would add is that there are not yet enough brands and retailers looking at this as a revenue upside play. I think we're getting
Is
there.
it capable of it, by the way,
Yeah,
in your opinion?
well, it's early, right? I mean, it is early, but there are some use cases and there are some success stories that can be pointed to, but not enough, discussion and strategy around the revenue. More of the talk, to Garish's point, has been around, the fact that, AI is going to replace jobs, that AI is going to replace people. And that narrative is more of a cost reduction and an efficiency play. Um, and, I think we're also seeing teams think about their tech stack differently and look at AI as a way where they can reduce and consolidate their spend on their different technologies and their different SaaS apps. And let's be honest, there was a lot of tech purchased over the last, decade and a half. So that makes sense that there would be some cost savings there. But I do think we're in this inning of talking about cost reduction. And I think that's interesting and there's value there. And I do think that some of the brands that are really kind of pushing forward are looking for ways to actually use it to drive revenue as well. So driving both sides of the P&L. Um, we're
What do you think we're in this whole thing? I'm very curious your thought on that.
Yeah. Where are we? I think,
What inning?
I think we're in the first inning.
I agree. I think we're like early in the top of the first.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing is still. I think it's going to be unbelievable what unfolds.
That's right. That's right. But there's still home runs being made in the first inning. So let's not
Yes.
let's not think that it's too early.
Yes.
This is definitely a time where you want to experiment, you want to test, you want to try. But there definitely is a lot of dialogue around, kind of cost reductions and AI, removing people. So I definitely, agree with you, Garish, that, I think that's overplayed. We're not seeing, really a reduction in people. Where we are seeing AI help is actually helping to, reduce a lot of the mundane work. And then those people are moving into more valuable work, right? They're moving into strategy, prioritization, judgment type roles. They're innovating on new things inside of the business. So I think that's the inning we're in right now. And I hope we stay there because there's so much work that we can do, as people now that we have some new technology to support us.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the people and the technology, and Bree, I'm curious if, or are you seeing, somebody with a mandate end to end? What's actually getting done? Are you seeing any great examples out there? Because quite honestly, traditionally something like this, you'll set up a center of excellence and that'll move from 30,000 feet down and go very, very slowly and sort of, methodically. But what I'm seeing is a lot of functional teams are either scared to act or they're just not 100% sure what to do. So, and that's not a tech problem. That's a governance thing, right? And I'm curious, are you seeing that in any pods within your business where there is a very clear mandate and like, wow, look at what they're doing, or we're still trying to figure all this out?
Yeah, it's interesting. Absolutely, yes. There are areas of the business where leveraging AI for efficiencies and process and tools is encouraged. There are also areas of business where I've seen, hey, before you work with a vendor that leverages AI, we've got to run them through our own governance review because we need to make sure that this is an ethical use of AI, right? Especially when you get customer data at play. So I don't know that that's fear, but more of an abundance of caution. Um, what I also have seen, in even our organization and with some peers in conversation is that there's also a lot of hunger for people to be early adopters and be change agents within their company. People are excited. They want to be a part of this and learn. My team, for example, is already figuring out ways of, hey, how do we use AI to help make recommendations for this project or this strategy? Are we, integrating this into our day-to-day behavior? I think that's step one. So how do we make this an instinct and just part of how we operate? That does remove some of the fear and the hesitation. But there has to be a really safe fail and learn mentality. Hopefully fail fast and learn, right? It has to be it has to be a safe space because anything new, right? And especially something that is just the pace of innovation and change is so rapid. You have to be okay with that. There's a strong likelihood we won't get this right the first time, maybe the first 5 times, right? Um, and
But they're going to be the first ones to win, right? The first
right,
ones
right.
sort of break everything, make mistakes, learn from them. Don't just,
It's the
put your head in
best
the
way to
sand.
learn. Get your hands dirty.
They're going to be the first ones to
Yeah.
actually win this whole thing.
Yeah, so I am seeing a lot of excitement, but like I said, you see a lot of bureaucracy, and not just in large global organizations like the one I'm at. I've heard this from peers that are in national and even small business. They're looking at, we don't have yet maybe the future insight to know where's this going to go and by when. And so there's a lot of experimentation, which is inherently risky, which is inherently a lot of unknown, right? And so I think it's been tricky to navigate. But I do see a lot of excitement, which is good, right? A lot
In
of
a lot of
excitement.
sectors too, by the way.
Right,
Like,
right.
it's not like sort of isolated. I can tell you in one of the sort of probably the most regulated category there is financial services. You walk into a Chase Bank today, I can tell you, Mr. Diamond has been on this from like day zero, and it shows. It really, really shows. You walk into Chase, I am knocked over, and not like in a bad way, but like the stuff they know about me, my business, my family, all the stuff I have there. And go to other banks, I'll be nice, it's not necessarily that seamless, right? It just
Right.
really, really isn't. And I don't know how many billions of dollars Mr. Diamond and company have thrown at this, but I know it's significant. And they didn't get it all right the first time. In a super regulated segment like that,
Yep.
those guys are figuring it out. And others in his space, not as much.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And that's, I think we're all I don't think anybody's not convinced that AI's here. It's a thing. We've got to figure out how to embrace it. We're going to make a lot of mistakes. We need to move fast. We need to have the right tools. But even that is sort of a paralyzing barrage of information. I'm going, okay, so we've got to figure out what does right look like? How do we measure right? So there's a pace that is uncharted, right? And I think having our bearings, having the support of our organizations to move forward, having leadership alignment to say, hey, we're going to go take some risks, and we might fail a little bit, but we're probably going to win before others if we
Yeah.
start failing now.
Yep. Garish, are you feeling similar stuff in your organization too?
So we have recently created an AI Center of Excellence. So that's happening. I'll leave some names out of it, but a very important person in the room is like, hey, everyone's got to adopt AI. And another extremely important person in the room is like, well, I'm not going to disagree with you, but I have a business to run. And in the meantime, I guess we'll dedicate some resources to that. And then there's a very unimportant person in the room, namely me. And I've been experimenting with AI for a while, and we've already got some results. And I think that says a lot about how different orgs can approach it. First of all, we should commend anyone who's like trying to institutionalize it. That's awesome. But then to the other point, uh, as Bree said earlier, a lot of those groups are sort of doing it from altitude. They don't really own the metrics. Their idea of they're willing to experiment, but they're not willing to experiment enough. There's something nice about having lots and lots and lots of small experiments running concurrently, and we need that when the AI technologies themselves are changing so quickly. So I'm a little skeptical of it, but at least we're trying. And then I think on the other end, some of this really feels like a socialization project. You have some folks who are just a little bit more comfortable with trying something new, and they're just really hunger for that. And, to the degree that people like that, I'm a person like that, are empowered, then, maybe our experiments will come to life. And if you're not, that's probably also okay. There are some other things that need to be done anyway. So, um, we're seeing some of it, but it's. I think the worst example that I've seen is when people sort of try to own AI, And that happens a little bit in the center of excellence model. And when you try to own AI, you become a new bureaucrat. So are we owning the models? Are we owning the rules about how we use it? Are we owning the results? And this is a it's happening at our organization, and it's just slowing us down. I don't think that's an AI problem. I think that's a problem in our organization. Does that make sense?
And I know it totally does. It totally does. And I think it's probably not uncommon either, by the way. I mean, there's really two ways to look at that. Like, oh, amazing, there's something new. I want to try it. And some, I don't want to do it. I want to just kind of do what I've been doing. And that's going to happen. And that's been true of every single technological progression since the dawn of time, since the plow. I mean, it just has been. Yep, John, look, you guys are one of the top service providers in this space across all kinds of different size businesses. I know you a little bit, I know your organization a little bit. How important is it to you? Look, you're shipping software, you're shipping a service and all that. And obviously that's the critical piece, but like, how do you all think about, yes, here's our software, here's what we do, but how are you thinking of memorializing it, to Garisha's point, in an organization, and then sort of evangelizing that across the organization to actually go use it once you guys are out of the building?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think some great kind of stories and told here, and great points of view. And I think you nailed it, and Garish and Bree as well, that this has to come from the top down, whether it's Jamie Dimon or, it's Garish and your center of excellence. It definitely has to be, an executive down, commitment to this transformation moment. That's what this is. This is probably for us a once in a lifetime type of change. We've seen cloud, we've seen mobile, we've seen all of these waves. This one is orders of magnitude different, and can create great opportunities for companies. So I think what we see is, the thing that gets done inside of an organization is when you put budget and accountability and you put measurable outcomes onto, a person's plate or onto a group of people's plates. So love the center of excellence idea. I think that's it. Every organization that we've seen and we work with, they have one thing in common. They have that executive commitment, someone at the VP level or down that owns some metrics, that owns some outcomes, not just like AI adoption, not just an AI strategy, but, metrics. They could be financial metrics. And to Garish, to your point, they could be other metrics too, beyond just, clear revenue linkage. But, they have to have some measurable outcomes, and you have to have people that are driving it and not afraid to drive change, and brave enough and bold enough to lean in. I think when we've seen it not work, it's when it's spread across too many different functional teams. You just get too many meetings. You get, very few
Mush.
things actually get shipped. And
Yeah,
so I think the brands that are winning right now, they've collapsed that ownership. They're brave and bold, and they are shipping experiments, to Garish, to your point. So I think the person that needs to own this, or the group that needs to own this, is the one that can actually get something shipped. And that's what we're seeing is working in the first inning here.
sure. So as we round out our conversation today, AI isn't just creating new opportunities, it's exposing the gaps that have been sitting underneath all these teams for a long time, specifically the processes, the org structure is probably exposing a lot of sort of, fissures within those things. And the teams that are going to win aren't necessarily the ones that get all this stuff right. It's the ones that can operationalize something and get something done. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you're getting something done. You're moving the ball down the field, and you're not looking for perfection, because it's not going to happen. Like, we're way too early in this for it to be anything like perfect. So as we sort of close this out, I would really like to thank panel for being, open and candid about, and practical, quite honestly, about what's really happening inside some of these organizations. And I think that's what makes some of these conversations so valuable. I want to thank very, very much John Murdoch from the great Fastr organization. I asked John once, I said, why do you not put the E in Fastr? He said, that's how fast we move. With that fast, we didn't have time to write the E. And so what I would share with you also is that John's going to be hosting us with RTM Nexus, a commerce leaders mixer at the Lead Summit on May 19th at 6 o'clock Eastern. Link will be in the description here. Spots are limited. Not everybody's going to get in, so get in, register now. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll all be there. Hit us up, and to learn more about Fastr, visit getfastr.com. GETFASTR.com. Want to thank you all, and we'll see you soon.